Um, just to make a couple of quick announcements first, and probably appropriate in the context of today, that we are launching our master's degree in rugby performance, and that's through our sports faculty, SHAS, which is great news for us. And we've also had some very good news recently, which we've featured on our website. And if anyone's interested in studying or coming to St Mary's, please go to the website, which is www.stmarys.ac.uk. That's www.stmarys.ac.uk. And the three bits of good news that we've had are that 98% of our graduates are in employment, vocation, or further education within 15 months of graduating. And that's according to the Higher Education Statistics Agency. The What Uni Student Choice Awards rated St Mary's in the top 3 for postgraduate study. And we just heard yesterday that the National Student Survey ranked St Mary's 3rd in London for overall and teaching satisfaction. But moving swiftly on to today, a very warm welcome to our special guest, Sir Clive Woodward at OBE, who is a visiting professor here at St Mary's, and is also, of course, he was the head coach of England when they won the Rugby World Cup in 2003. Sir Clive's playing career included nearly 150 appearances for Leicester Tigers, and he's also played for England, including the Grand Slam win in 1980, and he's played and toured and been the head coach of the British and Irish Lions. Also, as part of Clive's coaching career, he coached at Henley, London, Irish and Bath before he took the England job in 1997. And Clive, of course, has also worked for the British Olympic Association. So a very warm welcome to Sir Clive.
Good morning, Richard. And I should also mention to everyone, you were my press officer all those great years when I was coaching England. So it's great to be online with you again, Richard. I hope all's well with you.
Yeah, all good, Clive, and great to see you again. And yeah, very, very happy times. So we're going to take questions from everyone that's registered over the next hour and a quarter. And just to get us underway, a couple of quick questions. The first one, I'm sure we'll do a deeper dive into the detail later, Clive. But there's obviously been a huge amount of conversation about the global calendar for the international and club game and the problems it's facing in the current difficult climate. What are your thoughts and perhaps your own vision about how those can be resolved?
I guess, first of all, I don't think it's anything new, Richard. I think we've all sort of hoped for an international kind of calendar for a long, long time, especially since the game went professional. But I think to stress to everyone listening, this is not easy. I mean, the people who are charged to trying to actually get some sort of agreement. It's not an impossible task, but to actually try and put something in place where everyone will be happy will be very, very challenging. And if I can just highlight a few kind of headline news, what it actually means is that if you kind of think of the calendar at the moment, there's no doubt that would mean our domestic game, our professional domestic game, not our community game, but our professional domestic game would probably move more to a summer game. So you think about that, you think Leicester playing Northampton, all those lovely big cold days in December, January, that wouldn't be anymore. You'd be watching that in sort of probably a more June, July window, which I think is possible because you can get the grounds watered. But, you know, when people are watching cricket, watching golf, suddenly you've got rugby union on the screen. So you've got to kind of get your head around that. I think the second thing is understanding in the autumn, that the autumn window would mean that sort of in October, November, you'd be having international games at Twickenham like we've always had. But then in November, we would go down to the Southern Hemisphere and play the All Blacks, Australia, South Africa in that 2-month period. So this international calendar is trying to align the two kind of seasons, which is pretty difficult in a sport like mine. I lived in Australia for 5 years, and what would mean we'd be playing test matches in Australia in November. All I know, it's flipping hot in November, Richard, and that's when most people are surfing and on the golf courses. You'd be playing rugby union. I think the last thing I'd say is it's I don't know exactly who's around the table, but you've got to get every one of the parties around the table, because you know the club game in France, the club game in England, they've all got big vested interests in this. It's not impossible. I just think at the moment with what's going on in the world around Corona, there's never a better time if that's is one positive, because it really has brought everyone to sort of sense the game is hemorrhaging big time, and the only way to really fix it on a long-term basis is to try and take a global season. But you know, when I think about global season, I also think of the community game, because you'd have the community game being played in the winter like we normally would do, as you said in your opening address, I still close to the community game. I coach Henley. That was my first kind of coaching job. So the community game would still be played in the winter, but then the professional game would very much be in the summer. Does that work? So these are big decisions. And also I think of the smaller countries that, Georgia, who deserve a chance of somehow breaking into the top flight. They need us. They need a carrot. They need a real opportunity. So it's a huge opportunity for the game, Richard. That's all I can say. It's a huge opportunity. Those responsible for it, all I can say is, my kind of thoughts are with them in many ways. I wish them all the best, because to try and do this and get everybody on side with this global game, it sounds simple, but just the seasons, the calendars, the amount of games players are playing makes it quite tough. I'm sure they'll come up with something, but also you don't want to compromise. You don't want to sort of a compromise agreement where keeps some people happy, some people upset, and that's going to always happen in these situations. You want something that's really groundbreaking, and you just hope the leadership of the game here, the people doing this, is strong enough to try and get this through.
Great, thanks, Clive. Well, I'm sure we'll come on to that later. We're starting to get some questions through, but just to encourage everyone to send your questions through, and we'll get through as many as we can. We've had the first few through already, but one more from me, Clive. England produced a pretty stunning performance to beat the All Blacks in the semi-final of the Rugby World Cup last year. Why do you think they couldn't quite take that form into the final and beat the Springboks and emulate what you achieved with the squad in 2003?
First of all, you're right. The game against the All Blacks was pretty special. But I was there, and I was with people like Martin Johnson, Lawrence Dallaglio, and I think we know probably better than anybody, and I mean anybody. That was a semi-final. It wasn't the final. If they'd produced that performance in the final of the Rugby World Cup, we'd still be talking about it now. But it was a semi-final, and Rugby World Cup's about winning, and nothing else matters. You don't get any prizes coming second in the Olympic Games, in Rugby World Cup final, mattering anything. So, being there firsthand, you just saw this amazing performance. And in that week in the build-up, everything was great. You could just feel there's a real edge to this team. I mean, Eddie Jones was great in the press conference. He was really in his belligerent best. And he said, who in the room thinks we can win this game? And of course, it wasn't a single hand. I wasn't there, by the way, but I heard about this. Who in the room thinks we can win this game? Wasn't a single hand went up. He said, there you go, we got no chance. So, and I think the English, we're probably better than most when we're in a corner and written off. That's kind of our kind of trademark. And this team was in a corner. No one thought they could beat the All Blacks, and they had a really good team. That England team was fantastic. When you look at Marrow and Owen Farrell and these guys, got some of the best players ever to play for England. So England knew they had a real chance, and they got everything right. And you could just, even before the game, I was pitch side with ITV. Owen Farrell came past, just had a firm handshake and eye-to-eye contact. And I just turned and said, they're going to win this game. You could just see this was there. And you've been there and kind of felt it when everything's right. So they win this game, and they play really well. There's no doubt about it. They didn't just beat the All Blacks. No one could say they didn't deserve to win that game. Then the following week being there was the most frustrating week ever, because you just feel it was completely different. The media, everyone in the media, I have to say apart from me, was saying England plays it 20 points, 30 points. It was England going to, because South Africa played, South Africa beat Wales in the semi-final, and Wales could have and should have won that game. So South Africa played really poorly. So you got this classic situation. And this South African team, look at their team on paper, you go, wow, this is a serious team. And of course, suddenly everyone's building up England. And I don't think England helped themselves. They just seemed to get distracted. It wasn't the same. And I was with Jono and Lawrence, as you know, and we're just going, this is going to be close. This is going to be more than close. In fact, I thought South Africa were going to win the game, because it's a complete reversal from the semi-final. And I just saw distractions everywhere. I don't normally go to the press conferences, despite the fact I'm working over there for the Mail and the ITV. I went to this press conference because I was interviewing Eddie Jones after the main press conference. And it was interesting. I went to this press conference, and Eddie and Owen were there, and it was the Thursday afternoon, 2 days before the biggest game of your life, and they were okay. It wasn't quite as sharp and edgy. It was a bit of too much humour for me, cracking around. But then they left, and half the press conference left with them. But then they send up two players. I mean, Scoop, you did this for 100 years. So they send up two players. So I stayed in the room when I was at the back and I had my baseball cap on, so no one kind of knew I was there because I didn't want to be asked about any of this. And the two players that said it was Dan Cole and Joe Marler. And I said, these are two guys on the bench, two front rowers. But honestly, I just sat there. It was like Laurel and Hardy. And I'm just going, I know they're on the bench, but this is 48 hours for the World Cup final. And it was just kind of, to me, it was poor, if I can use that word, and that's me being polite. It was really poor. And as history turns out, these two players are going to have a huge, huge role in the game in 48 hours' time. With Sinclair going off so early, and within so Cole's on really, really early. Marler comes on because they take off Mako Vinopola. And I just thought, and then the South African journalist who I knew really well came up to me after the press conference when these two had finished larking around for 20 minutes. It wasn't larking around; it was embarrassing. And they said, "Well, if that's the mood in England camp, we got half a chance." And I just left that, and that said everything to me. I just think they got complacent. I was looking at stuff on social media. A lot of guests were arriving in the camp from celebrities to youth, from Australian people. I think they got it wrong. And, I've exchanged pretty kind of curt texts with Eddie since because he's kind of heard what I've been saying. I think they got it wrong. And I just remember, back in 2003, after we beat France in the semi-final, just sitting every player down and just saying, guys, just give me 1 week. There's going to be distractions everywhere, from family to friends to media to sponsors. Just don't get involved. Win the World Cup. Do what the hell you like next Saturday, Sunday. Just win the World Cup. Just give me 1 week. And we went mad on not getting distracted by anybody. And I just think the team got distracted. Right down to the blinking team didn't arrive on time. I'm on the pitch side. Normally we position our cameras so we're behind the England warm-up and we're well into the programme. And I've got the ITV producer on the headphones going, "Where's England team?" I'm going, "Don't ask me. I'm still on the touchline. I don't have a clue where they are," because they weren't there. They arrived late. And they arrived literally half an hour late for the World Cup final. And it's a meticulous military operation, that preparation. So to arrive 30 minutes late for the World Cup final, just said their heads just weren't quite there. And I think it was best summed up. You said before about how good the semi-final was. When I got back, I got in a cab. And this taxi driver knew who I was, and he said, "What happened?" I said, "What do you think happened?" And he said, "Well, it was a bit like the Olympic Games final. You go to the semi-final, and Usain Bolt beats the world record in the 100-meter sprint. You go, wow, semi-final, world record. And then the next day you go to the final, and Usain Bolt comes fourth. I mean, and I said that is the best analogy I've ever heard about what happened to England. In the semi-final, you beat the world record, you play unbelievably well. There's nothing about semi-finals. There's nothing about marks out of 10 at how you play. It's about winning these things, and they got it wrong. I'm glad Eddie's staying on. I'm glad he's got a chance to resurrect it because I think he'll learn a huge amount of lessons that week. But gee, they got it wrong, and England should have won. In my view, they're the best team. They're the best players. And 1 to 15, that team should have put away South Africa. But I think they got badly distracted, and they didn't just lose; they got blown away. And that's what I think. And we've then never had a report back from Twickenham. There's never, I've been chivying various people at Twickenham and said, "Where's your report? I want to know what happened. Where's your debrief on what happened in the biggest game of your lives? You didn't fire a shot." But everyone seems to just moved on quickly, and we've all kind of got about it. But there you go. But those players will regret that, or many of them, because many of them won't get a second chance at it. Some of them will. Maro, Owen. So they'll have a good team in Paris in a few years' time. But so will France. And France are doing some work down in France now. France have a very good team in 4 years' time. So it won't be easy. So don't assume, well, just because we've won or we've got to final, the same team will win in 4 years' time. It's going to be doubly hard for this team in 4 years' time.
Yeah, you mentioned about Australia turning up late for the 2003 final, Clive. Did you say they were about half an hour late?
No. England turned up late.
England being late. Okay. England
turned up late for the game in Japan.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was harking back. I was looking back to 2003 because Australia turned up a little bit late for the final that day. And when it came to the coin toss, all the TV cameras were around for the coin toss. And Jono just looked at George Gregan and just said, "There is a game on, George." And it was just one of those nice little moments. But
you just can't do it. I just don't know how you can arrive late for the World Cup final. I just do not know how that can happen in your worst nightmare. How can it happen? And these are questions I'd love to ask the powers that be. I've liked to ask a lot of questions based on just because when you're in Japan, you see this stuff.
Yeah.
That's one of the headline news with the papers was England are organising the open top bus parade. And this is in the papers on the Thursday. The game's on Saturday. And how on earth can that be a story or be? Because that's what loses your man is. And all I kept thinking about was these flipping South Africans, these amazing players, these big guys in their hotel somewhere in Tokyo, just sharpening their studs, just waiting.
Yeah.
Bring it on, bring it on. You're playing against tough, great players. You look at some of their players in their team, and you just don't want to wind them up. You don't give them anything. And I just think England got it wrong, and I think Rasmus did a great job in feeding them all this information that was going down. That South Africa just there to make the numbers up, and England got the whole thing wrong that week. And that's what I think happens, because it can happen. You can see it, and you just knew from the first 5 minutes England weren't going to win that game. From the moment Billy passed the ball behind Owen Farrell, which I've not seen ever, you go, whoa, they're not here. They're not the races here.
Okay, I mean, we're just going to move on to some of the questions we've had through, but thanks very much for that. And I do remember you talking to the players about distractions in the week of the final in 2003, and I think the word I used more often in that week was no than I'd ever used before, and then the following week was okay. It was one of those weeks to avoid the distractions.
But I think in sport, I had this great job with the Olympics, and the number of times I said to Olympic athletes, the nearer you come to your big events, there'll be distractions everywhere, especially from family, friends, and you're worried about. And part of my job in the Olympics was trying to keep all that away from the athletes. Just focus on your job, win your medal, win the gold medal, go home. Yeah. Don't get distracted. And it's such a simple message, but you can see it because they all get kind of carried away with the buzz and the excitement of the whole thing. So it's not easy, but it kind of helped me because I kind of, this is my second World Cup, and you kind of more experienced of this than that happened. But England got it so wrong that last week. There's no doubt about that.
So on to some questions, Clive. You mentioned Georgia just now, who a lot of people think should be in the Six Nations. And there's a question we've had, should promotion and relegation be brought into the Six Nations with a view to giving more exposure and higher level of competition for the Tier 2 nations?
Unquestionably, yes. I mean, we talk about, global calendar changes and all this sort of stuff. This one, you think about it, is just a complete no-brainer. And this is what frustrates me so much with rugby at times. We've got this great game. And I've been involved in it at the top level, since my early 20s when I played for England, which is a long time ago. But it hasn't really moved on, and the Six Nations, the Five Nations, the Six Nations now is outside the World Cup, the number one rugby tournament in the world. It's fantastic. But I just think you make it even better. And it's just quite simple. You must have promotion and relegation. It's kind of, it's beyond the pale now where Italy haven't won a game in years. Where you go to Rome, the result. I mean, it is not what sport's about. So, and also I don't think it's helped Italy. I think Italy would have been far better off, getting some real fire in their belly going, if we don't win these games, we're back in Division 2. But most importantly, you're giving a real carrot to the Georgias, all the European companies, Russia, they want to weigh in. If you're just blocking that because it's a complete closed shop, it's absolutely wrong. And I'm just hoping that part of this restructuring will make, not only the Six Nations, but the Rugby Championship allow other teams to get in. And, you can be nothing more frustrating than being a top Georgian player, a top Georgian coach, or the federation or sponsors, and they just want a fair go at this. And, when you think about football, especially the Premier League football, yes, we love the top of the league, but what's really exciting, if there's no relegation from the Premier League in football, we wouldn't be watching any football now. What's the most exciting thing is what's happening down the bottom. Can Villa, Bournemouth, and these guys surprised? And that's, and also you think about the Premiership, 3 teams go down. 3, not there's like 1. So all I'm saying from the Six Nations, there should be 1 relegated, 1 come up, even have a playoff if you need to. Just have a playoff in Georgia or Rome if it's Italy, but give them something to go for. And it's just wrong for the game. And I think sport is about promotion, relegation, winning, losing. It's why we love it. And I think the Six Nations for so long has been a complete closed shop, and it's not helping the game. Hopefully now, as I said, this pandemic will bring that about, and not only Georgia but all the European sides will have something to go for, and trying to get promotion to the top league.
Okay, you just mentioned COVID there, Clive, and we've had a question saying there are reports of law amendments intended to reduce the risk to players of COVID-19 transfer. Do you see any of the potential law changes becoming permanent amendments, for example, removing the option for scrums to reset to speed up the game?
Well, I'd like to think some of the law changes, even outside of the coronavirus, I think the game has got slower. I think the resets of scrums drive you nuts. I think box kicking drives you nuts. There's stuff about the game where I just look at it from a coaching point of view. But if I was still coaching, where you want to, the game of rugby, like any sport, is best watched when it's played fast and quickly. And so you like to think some of these rule changes would come about anyway. But in terms of the actual, I think you've got to be pretty certain in your evidence that one scrum or two scrum is going to make any difference. I don't see that as a reason to have to stop reset scrums. I really don't see that. I think we've got to just take a bit of common sense in that as well. So I wouldn't like to see rules brought in just because of the coronavirus outside of the spectators. And the rule changes, I'm looking at any rule changes based on, does this improve the game regardless of coronavirus? If it doesn't improve the game, I wouldn't do it. If it's going to improve the game, definitely do it. And I think, I think we all love scrums. Well, most people love scrums. I'm not sure I love them as much as everyone else in the game, but scrums are a great part of the game, and I understand them. But the number of resets now is if you actually put a time clock on it, it's huge. So, I want competitive scrums, but I want just less resets from scrums.
Okay. Clive, we've got a working relationship with Leinster Rugby, and I mentioned the Rugby Masters programme at St Mary's earlier. One question we'd like, one of the guys on the programme would like to ask is, what do you think the future coach will look like, and what would they need and require to successfully work with players at the top level?
He'll probably be bald, wear glasses, in his mid-60s. I think that's a really good question, actually, which I've just got to think for a few seconds. What will the future coach look like? I think the one thing, it's interesting with coaching, rugby still has never moved on. We say it's a 15-man game, but we still have forwards, we still have backs. And I'm interested in watching, when you see most of the coaches still tend to be forwards. It's probably because they can't get a job anywhere else in the game, but most of them tend to be. I like to see backs coaching teams because I think the back, and obviously I was in the backs, because I think the backs want to play they do want to play the game quickly. So I'd like to think there'd be far more backs coaching the game, which would be one kind of headline news. But I think it's just the pace of the game. You want to play the game. I want my players to go onto the pitch knowing. And when you've achieved this, it's a great thing before the game. We know we're going to play. Every player is going to touch the ball. We're going to play so quickly. And my mindset is always, if we play the way we're going to play, I don't care who you are, you're going to have to play bloody well to actually stop us doing this. And that was always my mindset. And playing quickly isn't chucking the ball around and sevens. It's just, you mentioned scrums, getting the ball in, getting the ball away. Line-outs, ball in, ball away. Rucks, ball in, ball away. How many times you get to a ruck now and you see your player, the scrum half, put his own foot on the ball and you slow your own ball down? I'm just looking, why would you do that? And this is top level players. Put your foot on the ball, stop that, start pointing around, set your pods up, box kick, and you just go, why would you do that if you're serious about it? Are you really enjoying your game of rugby for doing that way? Where to me, you get to the ruck, the ball comes out, the first player there, whether it's got one on his back or three on his back, he moves the ball. You just play, quick. And I had this amazing conversation with Maro Toji. He did this podcast with me. It seems like years ago, but it was only 2 months ago. And I just said, look, the 2003 team just played so much quicker than your team. And he looked at me down the camera and said, you've got to be kidding me. And I just had this really funny conversation with him. And I said, just go and watch the 2003 team play in that final. It wasn't one box kick, not one box kick. The ball is moving. The ball is moving so quickly. The game was played at different levels. So the game's been slowed down at the moment. So to answer your question, I'm open. I don't, I was sort of having a bit of a laugh at forwards and backs, but whoever's coach, you just want your players to go out there and play really quickly. And forwards love to play the game quickly. They don't want to sit around in huddles and all this sort of stuff. And I think the game's been slowed down and it's not as good for it. And I want to see coaches play quickly. And the more backs can go into top line coaching jobs, the better for me.
Okay, thanks for that. Another question about the Premiership this time. Premiership Rugby have issued a statement saying they're sort of paraphrasing here, protecting the integrity of the competition, but there's been questions raised about player welfare for playing 7 games in 4 weeks. What are your views on the player welfare issue there?
Well, I think again, if some common sense come into it, because of what's happened with Saracens, there's no big games on the line here in terms of people going down. So really, I would almost applaud the Premiership clubs for using all their squad. Yeah, so your star players are not going to be playing in every single game, and they've got to really manage their squad. If that means there's some funny results because one team may put out almost their second 15 to start the game, in this climate, in this environment, I would absolutely do that. I wouldn't get too worried about it because I do take player welfare really, really seriously. And I think to ask your top players to play that many games, it is tough. The game is unrecognisable in terms of the physical contacts. And when you see the players afterwards in the changing room and you see them and you think, well, you're going to be playing in 2 or 3 days' time. It's bad enough in football. I think football is doing a great job at the moment in getting through this. But rugby is a different league, and you've got to be really careful because that's when people get injured. There's no doubt people get injured in our game when they're fatigued, when they're tired, when they're carrying slight injuries. So, I would just get everyone just to calm down at the moment and, finish this season. I think the right to try and finish the season. I hope it does all happen for them. But you got to put player welfare at the top. And it is tough. I mean, when, we've kind of been there, you're a coach, you've got to win the game. You want to put your best team out. So it takes a brave coach to start really infiltrating his younger players, his academy players into your squad. But here's a great time to actually do it. It really is a great time to actually do it because certainly the relegation side of the league is over. The Saracens going down. But, people have got to take this seriously. And, I'm surprised there's not more rules about it because I to actually just say we're taking player welfare seriously and don't know the exact timings, but if you're playing so many games, that's just too many if you really are serious about player welfare.
Okay, thanks, Clive. We've touched on the global calendar before, and it looks like the Lions tour is going to go ahead as scheduled. Who would be your captain? Who would you choose to be captain of the Lions next year?
Well, I think the sport for choice. I mean, and it's a huge period, but of course, Alan Wynne-Jones. It was, I'm assuming Alan will go. I mean, he's again just a freakish player. I mean, he's so good, and he seems to be even getting better the older he gets. So, Alan Wynne-Jones be one. Marrow definitely. Despite the fact he's not coaching, captaining England at the moment, I think he's such a quality guy. Owen Farrell. So these are names. I think Gatland is in a really strong position. He knows that. I think it will be. And that's why we were all hoping. I think it was great that the Lions have kind of almost taken the initiative, say, right, someone's got to stop messing around here. We're going. These are dates, and then we've got to stamp our kind of authority on this. I think it will be clearly a very strong Lions team, based on England getting to the World Cup final, Wales making that semi-final as well. So I think it will be strong in terms of captaincy. I think they'd be the 3 standout characters, and probably. If I had to put a name, probably Marrow would be my choice at this stage. So I just think he's got to do something differently. I mean, Faz has been there, captain England in a World Cup. Same with Alan Wynne-Jones. But I think to bring a young player like Maro Itoje into and he was superb in New Zealand. I mean, I can remember all the fans singing his name, in the last Lions tour. So Maro, I think, would be a great job, and also just being someone a little bit different, so different voice, because no one would have heard him before. In terms of all the international players. But it'll be a great Lions team. It'll be a great series because you're playing against the World Cup winners at home. So it'll be a magnificent series.
A double question next. One covering the perceived decline in the game in Australia, and what are your thoughts about how they can potentially reverse that as a power in the game? And the second part of that, Clive, is North America. Is whilst the USA Sevens rugby and Canada Sevens are all going pretty well, do you think the North American teams, Canada and the USA, could ever become a powerhouse in the world game?
These are big questions, Scoop, to be honest. I mean, Australia I can probably answer more succinctly because I lived there for 5 years. I mean,
You played for Manly, yeah.
Played for Manly, love Australia. My first two kids were born in Manly. Won a World Cup based out of Manly, as you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love kind of Australia. I love Sydney. So, but I've always admired not only Australian rugby so much, but Australian sport, because when you live there, you realise that they're a huge country in terms of geography, but a tiny country in terms of population. And when you see the quality of their sports teams, forget rugby for a moment. When you look at their rugby league team, is unbelievable. And I got really into rugby league when I was there. This game, Aussie Rules. I don't think Aussie Rules is a great TV game, but when you watch it live, it's absolutely spectacular. It's one of those games. I used to go and watch Sydney Swans on a weekend when I was playing at Manly over the Oval in Sydney. It's just an amazing game. And then you got cricket. So for them to produce the quality of players and teams they do, and then you look at the Olympic team, their swimming team. They're amazing. And rugby just seems to have, it always was fourth, to be fair. When I played there, I'd say it was the fourth most popular team game. But it now seems, for whatever reason, just sort of almost fallen off that perch as well. They've just gone a little bit below. And I think they made a couple of big errors. They had their three kind of franchises, which was New South Wales, Queensland, the Brumbies. And I think with their population, that was probably about right. They need 3 pro teams to support the Australian team. They then decided to go to 5. They put the team in Melbourne, put the team in Perth. And I think that spectacularly backfired. And once you start going in reverse gear, so I think they've got to get back to 3 teams, 3 provincial teams. They've got a lot of top schools there, putting union players forward. But, they've always massively overachieved. For them to have so much success in the World Cup, was it 1999, wasn't it, when they won in Cardiff?
Yeah.
John Eales and Nick Farr-Jones, they've been to finals in 2003 with Eddie's team. They've massively overachieved. That's the way to look at it. So they've always overachieved as a country. And I love Australia. I love everything to do with Australia. So, but I think this comes back to the global calendar again. I think people are sort of fed up with Australia playing New Zealand and South Africa. They want something more now. They want this international calendar. And hence you'd say, well, if they can do this, if teams can go, international teams all go to Australia in sort of October, November, which is the plan, despite be flipping hot, because that's their summer, that can only be good. So they do need some real, they've got to change. If nothing changes, Australia really will struggle. That they need some sort of boost to their game just to make it a lot more interesting. As I played for England 40 years ago. Twickenham was packed. You doesn't get this modern, filling Twickenham isn't a new thing. Twickenham's always been packed. Six Nations games has always been packed. When you go to Australia, international stadiums are not packed. They've really got, you see Australia playing the All Blacks and the stadium's half empty or half full, whichever way you look at it. You suddenly realise it's tough, and it's very, very easy to be critical. I see it the other way. I think they've done unbelievably well. And they're very resourceful people when it comes to sport, and they like to win. So I think they need this new global season somehow more than any other team, or any international team outside of the people trying to break into the Six Nations. And they need that. I think Fiji, Japan also need a way into the rugby championships, whether it's promotion or relegation. But I just see 6 northern teams, 6 southern hemisphere teams. And then to the second part of your question, again, the talent over in North America is huge for rugby, but you just like to think they would have been developing it for a lot longer in terms of the game's not helping them. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of great people over there trying their very best to do all this amazing stuff. But if the game doesn't help them by giving them carrots so they can join these competitions and join the international game, it's really tough. And, let's face it, all these, if America come to play England at Twickenham, no one's going to be going, wow, can't wait to go and watch that game. And it's a real shame. So there's no magic formula for me outside of you've got to create competitive structures and give all these international teams a real carrot to get there. And probably America, Canada, with their kind of historical financial wealth, if I can, in terms of sponsors, would have a chance of doing that. But if they've nothing to play for, they're going to give them a carrot and use excuses. The Six Nations is looking after itself all the time. The game's just going to stay where it is, and that's still the kind of not a worry for me, because I think the game is great, but it could be massive. You know, nothing's changed in 40 years, if we're brutally honest. To go to a whole new level, you need some real leadership at the top of the game, and to make some real radical changes to actually take the game kicking and screaming to another level.
Okay. Clive, I've had another coaching question, and this is from someone who's played for the Harlequins women's team, and she is gradually been moving up, improved her coaching qualifications, and she's about to take charge of the Harlequins under-18s women's team for the forthcoming season. What advice would you give her as she sort of steps up the coaching ladder?
Well, first of all, congratulations and well done. I mean, coaching is a great thing, but also it's a career that many people shy away from. And that's one of my big criticisms of a few of the England players I know. I wish they'd gone into coaching, not in the media role. So what was the lady's name, Richard? Sorry,
Bina.
Bina, well done, Bina, and congratulations. The number one thing in coaching is, and no matter what level you're coaching at, is this level of enjoyment, which is an easy word to say. You know, and enjoyment comes from just really preparing your sessions really well, and you want to do a lot of detail, but you want to, you know, at the end of the session, have your players really enjoyed that session with you? Have they got something out of it? It's been fun, a lot to actually do. And then the other thing I'd say in terms of rugby especially, you know, we have a thing called the word basics. I think to win in rugby, you've got to get your basics right, and your basics to me are very straightforward. It's your line out and your scrum, and that's it basically. So if you can get your line out and your scrum, and that is not me being kind of negative at all. In other words, you throw the ball in and win your ball, you put the ball in the scrum, win your ball, you can play. Then you can develop your whole game around that. But what I would say is when you put the ball in the scrum, the line out, put it in quick, put it in fast, and play quickly. Get it in, away, and over. So really keep focusing on your basics, and also don't underestimate what your players can contribute to this by sitting down with them, asking them what do they think. So, you know, a lot of coaches think it's we whistle, tell. You've got to create a two-way dialogue between what you're actually trying to do. But number one thing is, can you look the players in the eye before they go out in the game, and they know they're going to have a great time out there on that pitch. You know, they're going to really enjoy the game, and if they win, awesome. If they don't, well, it won't be for lack of trying or lack of trying to do things a little bit differently. But the big message to me to that lady is congratulations and well done.
Fantastic. Clive, a question about your thoughts on the rule changes being trialled in Super Rugby in Australia, which include 10 minutes of golden point extra time in the event of a draw, replace red-carded players after 20 minutes. If a player kicks the ball into touch on the bounce from inside their own half to the opposition 22, the kicking team gets the line out. Just a sort of overview of those.
Oh, listen, it's the most important about all those, although I won't go through each and every one, but I've been watching them, obviously been watching on TV. I think they're all okay. There's nothing, but the key thing is just you've got to. That's what I like about you know, it almost sums up Australia and New Zealand. They try things. They don't wait. They don't wait for approval. Almost, just try it within our game and let's see if this makes a difference. Let's really evaluate it. And the biggest thing to me, and this is what we're picking up at the moment, is, you know, does this go down well with the fans and the people watching the game? And it's been such an eye opener that we've kind of missed the plot here. That, you know, outside of players, the number one important bit are fans. You know, without fans, you have no game, no excitement. It's just, you know, you've seen it in the football. Whilst it's been good watching the football, there's nothing without fans. Golf is nothing without fans. The Ryder Cup, rugby is nothing without fans. So if you can make the game more enjoyable for the fans, because that's what you're trying to do here with the various rule changes, try it, test it. Don't be left wondering. And I think rugby does need to change its kind of rules. But the biggest thing to me is the game has got slower, and we need to change this. You know, we need to change some rules about how to speed the game up. And my big kind of soapbox thing is box kicks, because you go out to a game of rugby where two teams are box kicking each other, you just go to the bar and buy a few beers, because by the time you come back, they're still box kicking to each other. You know, hoping someone's going to get a tackle on either side. And the second thing is people arriving and putting your foot and slowing the ball down. That should be an immediate penalty. If you shut the ball down, you arrive, put your foot on the ball and start slowing the game down. Well, it's just penalise him. You don't want to play the game. You know, you're not entering the spirit of what we're here to play rugby for. You're just slowing the game down. So, I mean, they might have probably more radical what's happening in the Southern Hemisphere moment. But I just say well done to them. You know, in trialing these things, evaluate it, and then we move on. But again, even now, you think they're ahead of us because they're trying things. So last time the Northern Hemisphere tried things before the Southern Hemisphere tried it. So this is what the international game, if the international game is really working, when they try things, both hemispheres should be trying this. Every team should be trying this, if it makes sense. And that's why I sort of question the leadership still. Where are we really a world game, or are we just, pockets of, the world game? If the world game could come together, it'd be amazing. As it is, we're Southern Hemisphere, Northern Hemisphere, the Americas, World Rugby. We're a fragmented sport that's still doing pretty well.
Clive, you mentioned coaching at Henley in the community game, and there's a question here about, as rugby will be one of the last sports to return to play at the community level post-COVID, what effect do you think this will have on the community game?
Well, I mean, obviously, you hope everyone will come through it, but it's got to have an effect on it. I mean, just in terms of the finances alone is going to be tough because it's a community game, but there are, not so much paid players, but they're paid staff. So yeah, I think it's going to have a big effect, and rugby needs to be looking very, very closely at this. And this is why I'm interested before. The community game is absolutely key. These are where your kids go and play. It's the feeder clubs, the professional game. This is the life and blood, and this is why England should always be the most successful country in the world, because we've got, 2,000 plus, I think it is, amateur rugby clubs. But they'll be going through tough times because they'll all have bills to pay. No one coming in, no revenue coming in at all to this. So they need their revenue from the various unions. The English community game needs it from the RFU. All I see in reports that's been cut, which I can understand because everyone's getting cut for everything. But it's going to be really tough on them, and rugby's got to be really careful. I think right down to if the community game is playing in the winter and the pro game is playing in the summer, is that going to work? Is that really going to work? And are we losing that already, that link between the actual game? These are huge questions which I'm not in a position to answer, but they're to be some of the questions I have to answer.
Okay. I've had a question from Mark, who's asked about player empowerment. What does it look like on and off the pitch as a coach now, and what are your perceptions of it? And then how has it changed the game during your time when you were a player, and then when you were obviously as a head coach, and now in terms of the consultancy work and media work you do?
It's good. What do you mean by player empowerment? What do you think it means by that?
I think the question from Mark is around player empowerment, making decisions on the pitch.
Oh, okay, cool.
Apologies if I've got that wrong, Mark, but I think that's what comes across in the question.
We're not looking at taking strike action or anything like that.
Don't think so.
Okay, player empowerment. Well, it's absolutely key. I mean, I was massive on this in terms of in all my coaching, from Henley upwards, not just England team. You kind of, I think the way I best describe player empowerment, it's and I got this from the Royal Marines when we went down to work with these guys, and there was we did some amazing stuff down there. And it really got me thinking about this. What became really clear to me when you work with these amazing professional military guys is when you cross that white line, you go on the pitch, you think you know what's going to happen. You've got your game plans, your plan A, B, C, and all this stuff that you read about. But, unfortunately, there's the bad guys on the pitch as well. It may not happen the way it's supposed to happen. In fact, very rarely does. And what you're taught in the war, the war is a whole series of cock-ups. It's how you handle those as a team of people, and how you handle them needs outstanding leadership, decision-making on the hoof, not sitting in classrooms, pre-planning, because it never happens that way, because the bad guys can actually cause you a lot of problems. And the secret is when you come off that pitch and go back over that white line, you got more points than them. And so you start to think that kind of logically. So we put a huge stall on leadership. Leadership was, not just the captain. There was every single player in the England rugby team when I was coaching them had a role in terms of outside their own playing position. They had a role in leadership. I just give you kind of a, not extreme example, but the restart. So when a team's kicking off to us, we've got the winger either side. So the two people in charge of our restarts are our two wingers. So in the Rugby World Cup final, we'd have Ben Cohen and Josh Lucy. So they would be organising mainly the forwards. They would be going bang, bang, trying to judge where the restart's going. That's leadership, getting these things happening in place. So all 15 players had a role to play. So empowering your team is absolutely everything. You can't just have 3 or 4. Everyone should take a part of the game, and I subdivided it up. And then the big calls go up to the hierarchy of the team. You know, when you got your 9, your Dawson, your Delalio, and ultimately Martin Johnson making the ultimate calls. But sometimes Jono can't make a call quick enough. We got to play quickly. He's at the bottom of the ruck, probably fighting with somebody. So we need the other players to make decisions. So it's not just the leader of the team. But I break the game down, and every one of my 15 players has a role to play in the game where he has to switch and make sure the restarts are properly, scrums are properly, lineouts are properly, our rucks properly, the way we handle the referee is done properly. Everyone's got a role to play, and that's leadership. But it's something it's totally coachable, and I think people underestimate how bright and clever and communicative players can be during the game of rugby.
Okay, great. A rugby league crossover question, Clive. Given what recently happened or recently been revealed about Sam Burgess and his time with England in 2015, do you think there will be successful league to union crossovers in the future? Obviously, Jason Robinson went from league to union during your time. Do you think there'll be more crossovers going forward?
I sincerely hope so. I mean, I kind of love both games, to be fair. I love all sport, but I really saw a lot of rugby league when I lived in Australia for those 5 years. You know, I used to go and watch, used to play for Manly on a Saturday and then go and watch Manly Rugby League on a Sunday at the Oval. And yeah, I learned a lot from rugby league. I think rugby league is a great game. So when I got the England job, it wasn't just Jason Robinson I was chasing half a dozen rugby league players to switch over. So glad Jason Robinson decided to do so for obvious reasons. But, you know, I'd also, it's one of those situations where I'm totally cool about this. I think it's a professional game. You know, I'd be Venice and the rugby union players going the other way to see rugby, because I think if a rugby union player can go and make it in rugby league, he'll be a special player, because rugby league is an amazing game. It's kind of less position dominated than rugby union in terms of scrums and lineouts. But I'd love to see the people going both ways. But I just think it's a big opportunity for the game of rugby union, especially because there's so much talent in rugby league. You know, in Australia especially, they've got more rugby league players. Heaven help us if the rugby league players also played rugby union in Australia. Watch out. So, you know, I just think there's so much to learn. And, you know, I personally learned so much off Jason Robinson when he came into our the player. He was one of the main reasons we made a big step change. Because when he came in, we went to a new level with this guy. He was fantastic. So, but I love both games. And I do. I watch both games on TV. I make a point of it. It's part of what I actually love doing.
Okay. I've had a quick question, Clive, about a lot of people talk about the transitions that players have to make. This is from Mark, for when they stop playing and how they then adjust to life outside of playing. But the questions around coaches and backroom staff, but I think more directly to yourself, how you made that move from being head coach of England, then you moved into football, and then you worked for the British Olympic Association, and now you're involved in a lot of other business and consultancy work. How did you make that transition yourself?
I promise you, Scoop, and I say this to my kids, I've never planned my career. It's just happened. And, you know, I just throw the kitchen sink, whatever I'm actually doing. You know, when England won the World Cup final in November 2003, if someone said to me that night, and 6 months later you'd be working professional football, I thought they'd start raving crazy that I'd done something seriously wrong or something. What on earth's happened? Because I was hell bent on taking England to Paris in 4 years' time and doing it again. But things happen, and I think that all I can say to people, you know, opportunities crop up. The grass is very rarely greener. Don't think just moving is the right thing all the time. But when you see an opportunity, or when you really feel, okay, it's time for me to move on, just move on with gusto and never look back. And I've always prided myself on, you know, I love my time coaching England. You know, that was an amazing period of my life. But I've honestly said I never missed it when I moved on into other things. You know, I'm a fully qualified football coach, moved into professional football. I would have gone into football management and become the boss, the gaffer, we call it in football. But then we got the Olympic bid, and I got off this amazing job with the Olympic team. I did 3 Olympic games, but I never planned this stuff. It just kind of happens. So all I'd say to everyone, whatever job you're in, throw the kitchen sink at it. Don't try and be too clever with your career. Just throw the kitchen sink out, and opportunities come your way then. If you're successful in what you're doing, other opportunities will actually come. I think a lot of people make mistakes. They try and find these opportunities when they're not maybe there, or they're maybe actually not even good enough to do their various jobs. So, as you know, Scoop, you're part of my backroom team. We had an amazing backroom team, and I picked the best people in the world, including yourself. Like, no bones about it. They weren't easy people to deal with. But if you're going to get the best people, sometimes that comes with a bit of a price, which I'm happy to pay, because you just want the best people doing their jobs. And the rest is history. But we've all moved on. We've all moved on to different things. You're now at St Mary's. You probably didn't think you'd be doing that job when you're in charge of England. So, which is all good. But I do follow everyone's careers. I follow the players' careers. I follow your career, and I'm just proud that team. Everyone seems to be doing pretty well. Everyone's moved on their life, and we don't sit in bars talk about England Rugby 2003 every spring flipping night. We kind of move on. We've got other things to talk about that are far more interesting.
Exactly, yeah. Great. A question about leadership, Clive, and being a head coach. And we touched on this with a question from Bina, but if there were 3, 4, 5 best tips that you could give someone who moves into that position, what advice would you give them?
I'm not sure 3, 4, 5. The number one thing I've always prided myself on is what I call relentless learning. I think sometimes you get into the not only my position or my head coach position, you've always got to be learning. And the moment you stop learning, you're going to come second. It's simple as that. So this came from my background. I went to Loughborough University. I'm a fully qualified teacher. I think most coaches I know are good teachers. It's the same thing. You're teaching. You're just teaching rugby players as opposed to students or athletes. And this thing about learning is everything. And I think the secret to this learning is this learning has got to be a two-way thing. Yes, I'm the head coach, but I've got my staff, I've got my head of media, I've got my defensive coach, I've got my head of sports science, and I'm saying to all of it, like, I want you learning all the time. I want you to become the best at I want you better than anybody else, any other rugby team, any other sports teams. You've got to be the best at what you've actually done. But the real secret to it is, can you get the players doing this? Yeah. The real secret, if you're going to sit there, if I'm going to coach you, it's going to be a two-way thing. Yes, I'm going to put every bit of effort and knowledge and passion into making you a better player. But I need it back. I need you studying, learning, questioning, watching videos, and that's how it should work. And what I've found, and I've been really lucky working in professional football, the Olympics, these top athletes, there's no difference. They are what I call sponges. Yes, they've got good coaches, but they are passionate about what they do. They question their coaches in a real professional way. And that's what I say. You've got to create that environment where it's healthy to actually question things going both ways between coach and player. But if you've got an athlete, maybe the most talented player you can think of, if they're not going to get really involved in this process, they're going to come second. If they're just going to sit there and rely on you, the coach, to give them everything, it doesn't actually work. And I say I've seen this from Chris Hoy to Wiggins to Rebecca Adlington to Johnny Wilkinson to Gareth Bale. All these people have been sort of touched on in terms of my coaching. They're all passionate about what they do. They're great, talented people, but you can't mess around with them because they'll question what you're actually doing. But just learning is everything, and finding ways of capturing it, keeping it, storing it, studying it, and learning is everything. The moment you stop learning, you're going to come second.
A great question on that, about in terms of learning, Clive, is what have you learnt from the multiple sports you've worked on since you left rugby? So through the BOA and through Southampton Football Club, what lessons would you take from those sports and take back to rugby now?
All it's done is reinforce what I just said. I mean, when you're lucky enough, the Olympic job was amazing because I did that for Beijing, Vancouver, and obviously London. That gave me access to all 26 sports. So I could go and sit in the back of the room, British cycling, British athletics, taekwondo, all these different sports. And what you find is, they're all massively differently. That's different. That's the one thing. There's no, just it's Team GB, you can't even compare British cycling with British athletics. Their whole DNA, their culture is totally and utterly differently. But you can learn from every single one of them. But I just go back to the people I've seen win, and I've seen these. The Olympic team was amazing in London. Their knowledge, their passion, for new thoughts, new ideas, but to engage the athletes in this. You know, when you're sitting there in a room and everyone's total silence is one way, because the coach, that's just so old school, and it just doesn't work anymore. And I'm sure, you know, with the current stars, you know, Klopp and Pep Guardiola, you know, I'm sure this is a two-way thing. But the players don't sit there. There's a real dialogue going, and it's encouraged by the coach. This is what the coaching is about. You want people in a real positive way, understanding, because the players are on the pitch, you're not. This is where there was a good question before about decision-making, whatever, about players in the field of play. They've got to know what's going on, and they've got to understand why they're doing things, as opposed to doing it because the coach says. You know, so this relentless learning is everything to me. And, you know, one of my businesses is actually called Hive Learning, which is all about how you capture this, how you keep this, how you store it on your mobile, but it's with you all the time now, and how you use the modern technology to really capture this learning on an ongoing basis. So it's huge for me. So to me, it's a very simple question. It's all about learning, and you must never, ever stop learning.
Okay. We're going to run on for another 10 minutes, if that's okay, until 10 past 12, and then we'll close things. So we've just got a few more questions to go through, Clive. I've had a question about, as a head coach, you were meticulous in your planning and preparation. Do you take a similar approach when working for ITV, and what does a typical match day working for ITV look like?
Yes, yeah. Look, I really enjoy the media side. ITV are brilliant to work for. I mean, what we hopefully everyone enjoyed what happened over in Japan and the coverage. But yeah, you prepare for it. You know, I want to be as good a hate the word pundit. Let's try to think of another word. Former player, former coach, expert in the room. And what I'm trying to always, it's strange. You kind of go in. I always go into every one of the matches with 2 or 3 themes that I'd like to get across, that I generally believe the people listening back home or on the TV would be interested in. And also I'm very conscious certainly with the ITV and BBC, where you a lot of the people watching may be non-rugby experts. So what may seem very straightforward to you, because you've played rugby and coached rugby in your life, would be very, what's that all about? So you've got to be able to explain it in very simple language. But I'd go into each game with just a couple of ideas of stuff I want to get across that no one else would be able to talk about apart from me, because I've experienced it as a coach. And I try and sit myself in the coach's seat, you know, and trying to understand what he's thinking, what he's going through, and get that across to the audience. So when you see people ask me questions, Scoop, as you know, I probably totally ignore that and just rattle on to what I want to say. So
no, the answers have been good. It's all good.
Mark Pugosh, that's a really good question, but what I really want to talk about is this. They're kind of looking at you there. So, but no, I prepare. It's not. I think if you just tap up and just chat, and you're not prepared, you're not doing your job properly. And sometimes all your preparation, you don't actually get onto the stuff you want to talk about. But you're trying to really kind of predict what's going to happen, and also trying to make it as simple and as interesting for people listening as possible.
Okay. You mentioned about leaders on the pitch, Clive, and part of that was dialogue with the referee. And, you know, there's a perception that some players can manage the referee. What is that something you've come across with some players are better than others at having the dialogue and managing the referee on the pitch?
Oh, huge. We did huge. It was one of our winning behaviours. The way you look at the referee in rugby has a huge role to play. There's no doubt about it. Probably more so than most sports I can think of. You know, because it is so subjective on what you're actually thinking. So getting on with the referee is absolutely huge. And you know, we used to always have one that was backed up by the second person to work with the referee, and we'd normally be, you know, Dawson was excellent at it. Matt was fantastic at it. Matt, you see now in all his media career and Question of Sport, I mean, he is able to speak, Dawson. He's not short of a word. But he understands the tone, you know, whether it's time to put his arm around the referee or time to go up to him and go, what the hell's going on, you know, and he just worked very, very closely to that. But just simple things, like we used to do things like, and again, Dawes, Brack and Co, they know this back in that. If a referee said something like, England back foot, means get behind the back foot. We always say, whatever the referee says, someone repeat it. Normally the 9, because he's there. So, you know, if Andre Watson shouts out, back foot England, Dawes shout out, back foot England. Because quite simply, we didn't want to give away a penalty. We weren't doing it for any other reason. And there's so many times referees afterwards came up to me and said, "Oh, your team was a joy to referee," because I mean, it's amazing. They used to repeat what we said, but we practice it, we train for it, we coach for it. So I think the way you control the referee is absolutely huge. Some doesn't always go your way. I mentioned Andre Watson, who was not probably my favourite referee. So I didn't think he had one of his best games in the World Cup final. But he's doing his best, and you're there to try and help him. But what we're trying to do is quite simply is not give away any penalties. That's what we're trying to do out of all this. We're trying to stay and also get penalties, get the opposition to give us penalties. But the referee is there. He's human. You've got to work with him. And we spend a huge amount of time on, what the referees were strong at. Some referees are really strong at the breakdown. Some people let things go. Some people are strong at the scrums. So you get to really, and we had one of the, Steve Lander, full-time referee at the time, his job was to give me the report on the referee because he knew them all personally, what their strengths are, what the weaknesses job. Then my job was to get that through to the players, especially whoever's playing 9, how you're going to work with the referee, et cetera, et cetera. So huge amount of work got on it because they really, really can win or lose you the game, and you've got to manage them as closely as best as you possibly can.
Great. We've got time for 2 more questions, and one of them, Clive, is looking ahead to the Lions next year. Could you name 3 exciting young players that you think could break through and get into the Lions squad next year?
Well, I'm not sure breaking through is the right word. I think we've got lots of amazing players. I mean, I'm probably more close to the English side. I'm not sure they're even how you describe them as being young even anymore. So, I don't know. I mean, Maro Itoje, I think he's young, he's exciting. He'd be right up there. I'm interested in Daly. I'd love to see Daly play in the centre. I just think we've got so many top wingers at the moment. I just think Daly playing 13, which I've always been disappointed we've never seen him in that position. It's always been. So I always think the reason I think Daly can play 13 because I think Manu's one position is 12, and I think England made a big mistake in the World Cup final in their selection. The best I've seen England play ever was in the Six Nations games where they had Farrell at 10, Manu at 12, and Toby Flood at 13. And I think Flood is an outstanding player. I'd love to see Daly challenging him. So I'd probably bring in Flood and Daly would be 2 breakthrough players who could end up playing. So I don't think there's a lot of top centres around. The reason I'm saying, when you think of all the home nation teams, there's no centres that are really crying out. Especially, I think there's a lot of inside centres, a lot of great 10s. But I think the outside centre position is really up to date, up for grabs. So I'd certainly look at Flood and certainly look at Daly as those 2 positions. And as I said before, I really like Maro Itoje, especially after he interviewed me on this podcast, which was one of the funniest interviews I've done. So he's a real star, this guy. And so those would be the 3 I'd probably name. Sorry, they're all English.
No, it's okay. And the final question, Clive, is rugby has often prided itself, this is from Hayden, as an inclusive and accepting sport. Are there steps that need to be taken to make the rugby landscape more accessible to a range of people from different backgrounds, initially at the grassroots level, but ultimately working up to the top level, and then thinking beyond that to areas such as coaching and administration? Would this also help grow and sustain the game internationally?
Yeah, great question. I think none of us, and I mean none of us, can sidestep the diversity inclusion kind of program at the moment. I think we all like to think, we understand this, but I think what I've learned is we don't. And you can never again stop learning about this and putting it into your own sports. We all want a diverse sports, but we need an inclusive sport. And inclusive means you're just really making sure no one's left out and that everybody feels inclusive in the whole sport. So the answer is yes. One of the businesses you mentioned I'm involved in is a ski academy. I'm the director of sport of a ski academy in the south of France. We've got 50 young athletes there. They're all youngest is 13, but the average is about 14, 15. International, and we are big on this, massive on this. So we are not only really doing a lot of work with the staff around diversity inclusion, but also doing a lot of work with the actual athletes now. So they really understand this, and then other things move into it, from bullying and just in making sure people are inclusive and bullies are found out. But it's just education again. It's good. It comes back to just relentless learning But to answer the question, we can never take this. This is something that's not, should never ever have gone away. It's got to be absolutely on the agenda, and to make sure everyone really understands what diversity and inclusion actually means. That would be a great starting point. And rugby is no different. We're a long way from where I think we should be in terms of a sport on a worldwide basis. To make sure we lead on diversity and inclusion in every sense of the word. Great.
Well, on that note, Sir Clive, thank you so much for your time today, and we'll finish the webinar there. And thank you for everyone who's registered. And if you do want to find out more information about St Mary's, we're at www.stmarys.ac.uk. And thank you again.
Thanks, Scoop. Take care, everyone. Thank you.